In today's intermediate Python tutorial video, you're going to learn about something very interesting about Python function arguments. Want to know what I'm talking about? Let's get started. Today, you're going to learn about the star args and star kwargs in Python and how to use them in your own Python programs. Recall something you learned probably a while back, which is functions. Now, in particular, we're talking about function arguments, the inputs to functions. So here's an example Python function, which takes two parameters, and the function returns the product of these two arguments. So passing in the arguments of 1 and 2 into multiply two nums, we get the answer of 2. Now, what if we want to multiply three numbers together? We can just add a third parameter to the function, right? We have a new function right here called multiply three nums, which takes three arguments and returns the product of these three. So if we call multiply three nums with 1, 2, and 3, we will just get 6 as the answer. Now, what if we want to multiply, let's say, four numbers, or 5, or maybe 6, or maybe 500? Now, this will get really tedious really soon. We can't define a separate function for each number of arguments just to get the multiplicative product of these numbers. So thankfully, Python allows us to define a function to accept any number of arguments using the star args syntax. So here we have a function called multiply. Now, instead of having 500, 5 million arguments here, we have one argument. We have one parameter called nums. Now, the special part about the syntax is the star, the asterisk right here in front of our function parameter. So what this is doing, let's just first take a look at the output. If I run this, we'll get that multiplying these numbers together will give us 120. These numbers multiplied together will give us this, and so on. If we don't pass in any values, we get 1 as the output. So what this is doing is it takes one argument, but then if you look at the function calls, this is 5 numbers, this is 9 numbers. How is all of these passed in as one argument? Now, the beauty about the star args syntax is all of these, even though they are passed as separate arguments, they are packed into one parameter, into one of these input values, the nums, and this is passed in as a tuple. We'll talk about that in a second. So this function essentially what it's doing is it first have a product equal to 1 for each number in the nums tuple. This is a tuple. We're iterating through all of these numbers and multiplying product by each of these numbers so that we get the final product and we return it. In this case, we don't pass in any value, so nums is an empty tuple, so we just return 1 because this loop never runs. Notice that instead of passing in, so we're not passing in a list or tuple of ints, we're passing in variable number of arguments, right? We can have 5 arguments here, we can have 4 arguments here, we can have 0 arguments here. So our multiply function now can take any number of arguments without needing to redefine the function in any different ways. Now this is a more general example. We have a function called f, which takes a star args argument. This is a parameter called args. Now, we print out args, we print out the type of args and the length of args. So let's take a look. If we call f with 4 values, true, false, 1, and 2, we'll see that, first of all, the type of the args argument parameter is a tuple. The length is 4, which is what we expect because we passed in 4 values. Now, this is interesting. We have a tuple of true, false, 1, and 2, while we clearly passed in 4 separate values. We didn't pass it in as one tuple. We passed it as 4 separate values. Now, that's where the star comes in. The star is going to be packing all of these into args. And we can use args just like any other tuple you've ever used. You can do things like for loops and indexing and etc. Right? And we can also call args whatever we want. Just like here we called it nums. You can call it names. You can call it my variables, my inputs, whatever. You want to call it something else, that's also totally fine, as long as it's a valid variable name. Now, that's all about args. Now, something that is very similar to star args is star star kwargs. Now, you might recall that function arguments can either be positional or named. Named also being, called keyword arguments. Star args allows a function to take a variable number of positional arguments. If we want to have a function to take an unknown number of keyword arguments, we can use star star kwargs. Notice there are two asterisks here in front of the parameter name. And this is very similar to star args. So here's a function called greetPeople that takes technically one parameter. And what it's doing is it's going to, let's just take a look at the function call here. We're passing in Alex is equal to 10 and Susan is equal to 39. That doesn't make sense. We don't have any keyword argument here called Alex or Susan. But then we can do that because we have the people keyword argument or dictionary sort of thing here. So if I run this code right here, we'll see that people is actually a dictionary. This, because we have two asterisks in front, this is a dictionary, as you can see here, and it has this value, right? We have two elements. The first element is with key Alex, which matches here, and then the value is 10, which matches this. Susan, Susan here, 39, 39 here. So the keys of our dictionary are the names of our keyword arguments, and then the values are just the values of our keyword arguments. And we can iterate through people.items for each person, age in people.items. We'll print out, hello person, you are age. So hello Alex, you are 10. Hello Susan, you are 39. So this is kind of the thing you can do with star star kwargs, right? So people is just a dictionary data, and just like the tuple that we talked about that is associated with star args, the dictionary associated with star star kwargs can be just used like any other dictionary. The keys are the keyword argument names and the values are the inputs given for each of these keyword arguments. Now you know about star args and star star kwargs. It's important to know that argument order does matter when defining a function. So these two function definitions here will crash the program just by having the order of our inputs wrong. It doesn't even do anything, it just has pass in our function body. So what is the reason here? So if I run this, we'll see it's invalid syntax. Actually, not that specific in what's wrong, but we cannot have a keyword, the star star kwargs, before the star args. So this must be in front. So if I just cut this and put it here and run this, we see nothing printed out because it's just passed and the function isn't called anyways. And here is actually, well, we need to remember that we have to have our positional arguments before our named keyword argument. So I just have to put this here and everything should be fine. Actually, let me run it without changing it. So this would cause non-default argument follows default argument. So we gotta change it up here. So we have y and then x is equal to 3, and now it works. So the order of function arguments for a function must be, first of all, the positional arguments, and then the keyword, the named arguments, and then star args. Remember, you can call this whatever you want, but it has to be this star args before the star star kwargs. Whatever you want to call this, that's also fine. So here's an example of the correct order of all four kind of types of arguments for a function. So x, y, these are positional arguments. And then z is equal to 0, that's a keyword argument. Star args right here, and then lastly we have star star kwargs. And here is another function definition called make order. So it's kind of like a simple example of when we can use all these for. So we have make order, it takes the store name, and then use credit card. This is a keyword argument that is defaulted to true. And then we have a tuple, a kind of a unlimited number of items that's packed into the tuple called food. And then we have a unlimited number of keyword arguments packed into a dictionary called pizza modifications. It's kind of a random example that I felt like was interesting to look at. All right, let's just run this. It didn't have any code in there, but this is something you can do. This is kind of a example of a program where a function can take positional arguments, named arguments, and then star args, and then star star kwargs. Now, star args and star kwargs allow Python functions to take variable numbers of positional and keyword arguments, which can be very helpful when writing Python functions. And that's the end of this video on star args and star kwargs in Python function definitions. If you found this video to be helpful in any way, please consider subscribing down below. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And with that said, thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you in more tutorials. In the meanwhile, happy programming!